Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here today to program Center Stage and exploring farm stress and resilience. And this is part two. We did part one last month in January. My name is Jill Baker Tingy, and I work for the University of Nevada, Reno Extension. I'm an associate professor and extension educator in Elko County in the northeastern part of Nevada. And I'm also a team member on the Nevada Ag Stress team. And I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Brenda Freeman.
Good morning. Thank you also for joining. I hope that some of you saw the films or were on the program last month because today's a film discussion. My name is Brenda Freeman, and I'm from the University of Nevada, Reno with Jill. And I've been doing farm stress work for, I don't know, 9 years now. And I'm excited about this topic, and there's so much to be learned. And so today our primary goal is to have a discussion of the films that we showed last time that we produced at the University of Nevada, Reno. One of the films, the first film, the Montana film, was done in conjunction with one of our panelists today. And so let's see, Jill, should we have the panelists introduce themselves?
That would be wonderful. Michelle, do you mind going first?
Sure, gosh, not at all. Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle Grokey Dewey. I'm joining from Bozeman, Montana. I am the Health and Wellness Specialist with MSU Extension and an associate professor here at MSU. And I've been working on the issue of farm stress since 2018 here in Montana, and then joined the RASA partnership. I'm sure you all have heard of the Western Regional Agricultural Stress Assistant Partnership. Many of us on the call are part of that regional team since 2020. So happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And then Maddie, will you go next?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jill. My name is Maddie Vanderkoy, and I am the Western Regional Agricultural Stress Assistance Partnership Program Coordinator. So I am based out of Washington State up here in the Northwest through Washington State University Extension. I have a background in human services counseling, and I grew up on a third generation dairy farm. So I am super excited to be here and super thankful for Brenda and Michelle's work on the film. So
Thank you, Maddie. And Clinton, we'll have you go.
Sure. Hi, my name is Clinton Wilson. I work at Colorado State University and the Colorado AgriAbility Project. I'm the state behavioral health program specialist here and have been working in this arena of farm stress and suicide prevention for the past, I guess, 4 years. I have a small farm here north of Fort Collins where I live, and yeah, have just been really drawn to all these conversations that bring people from all over the country and all over different uh, institutions and organizations together to have this conversation. It is fun jumping on calls and seeing people that I've talked to over the past 4 years and seeing our connection from a community perspective. So, really happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Well, thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see the important work that you're doing in our states and also for our Western Regional, um, what is it? Agriculture Stress Assistance Program, and just appreciate that you are bringing so many different experiences to this discussion, and we're excited to hear more of what you do. And so we'll go ahead though and start with our audience. We'd like to hear from you if you had any reactions or comments to the films, if you were able to view those, or if you had general questions that you'd like to get us started on. And when we have a question, either come through the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, or you can just come on screen and ask your question, and then we'll kind of open it up, and panelists, we'll let you decide who would like to respond. If all of you have a response, that's great too. But we also know that everyone has their own specific areas of expertise, and so we'll let you kind of respond based on that as well. So audience, any questions or comments?
How many of you had the opportunity to view, were either on the last program or have had the opportunity to view one or both of the films we're discussing today? And you're welcome to respond in the chat box or just speak up. It's a small group.
Vince is saying, I'm afraid I missed the first session, and so I haven't seen the movies. Thanks for the link. I do wonder if folks have shared them with producers and how they tend to respond, especially folks who might not necessarily be asking for something like this. And so I'm not sure if panelists, if you have had a chance to show, Michelle, you have, and then I know Brenda, just this past weekend, you were able to show the film. So we'll start with you, Michelle.
Gosh, thanks. Thanks for the comment, Vince. I recently, here in rural Montana, I'm not sure if anyone's visited, but there's a town called Thompson Falls in the northwest corner of Montana. And I was invited to share a lot of health promotion materials to a group of women, all producers, everything ranging from dairy farms, small farms, large bison operation, ranching operations. But there were about 17 female producers in the audience. And it was the first time that I showed the women's film. So it's the longer one of the two, if you're looking at the link. So it's the Growing Humanity film. And so we showed the film and in conjunction with some questions, just to get some group discussion going. And I was really pleased to see, granted, some of these women knew each other, some didn't, but they broke up into groups of 5 or 6 after watching the film. And really just that first question of that Brenda asked everybody to start our talk today, what kind of thoughts and emotions were evoked by watching the film? It garnered so much conversation. I only got to my third question and an hour went by. People were laughing, they were crying. I mean, there was a lot of emotion just felt in the room. But I think generally they said that it was really nice to watch other women, in this case, producers, share some of the same stressors, share some of the same life experience. Some of them said, "Gosh, I've been living and working on my farm 50 miles up this dirt road, and I feel so isolated, like it was only me going through these things." And now I realize through the film and also through talking with a lot of their community members and other women that we're not at this alone. So I had only the chance to share that film in a group like that, but it was really positive. And I would recommend, if you do it, to have some sort of formal kind of discussion question afterwards. But it went really well.
I'm
Thank
glad
you for
Michelle
sharing.
brought that. I'm glad Michelle brought that issue up because with some of the films, we've been making a lot of films across the states and territories in the Western region. But what I think we're learning is that it's a more meaningful experience rather than just counting the hits. Like, isn't this great? We got a lot of hits on YouTube. That the better way to utilize these films in raising awareness about farm stress is to tie them in with discussions. And we do have discussion questions that I'm not sure, Jill, if we sent those out last time, but we can link those if any of you would like to use the films and lead a discussion. We put questions together for both films as well as some directions on how to lead a good discussion in case leading discussions is not not exactly something that you normally enjoy. So that's available to you if anyone's interested.
Brenda, did you want to share your experience when you were able to show the film?
Um, I'd rather first hear from Clinton and Maddie about because you weren't involved in, I have a biased viewpoint because these are UNR students who made the films. And so my viewpoint is pretty, so Maddie and Clinton, what were your reactions as you saw these films and how did it underscore or work with the other work that you're doing already in farm stress?
Yeah. I was really moved by the films after watching them, specifically the Grounded in Family. It really resonated with kind of how my family farm functions. The one thing that I thought was it really strung a note with me was when the son was talking about my dad makes the decisions, my dad calls the shots, my dad is in charge, it's his land. at the end of the day. And then it cut to his dad and he said something like, "I'm not the boss." And I just thought that was kind of a funny contrast because it reminds me of the relationship that like my brothers and I have with my dad. Um, just kind of that humility, humbleness that in general these farmers kind of traits that they possess from a cultural standpoint. So I thought that's what kind of struck out to me because it hit a more personal note. So
Um, I felt like that both films were super rich, and the one that Maddie just mentioned, I've actually been to Maddie's farm and have seen it, and I can imagine those conversations and those relationships being similar. And I felt like that film did a great job of really showing kind of how family that are in multi-generational farms can kind of feel isolated and just do their thing, and they get stuck in their own way of doing things, and that passed down from the father saying that the dad made the decisions and that his father did, and that the son saying that his dad did, and just kind of the way that the dynamics are, was a great snapshot of what I've seen a lot over the past 4 years as I've been working with folks. And so I appreciated that film for that. I thought it was real. I thought that the mom of the story, she also represented a piece that she named it well, that the historically moms or wives on a farm have operated in the background. And I thought that she named those dynamics and stressors that she experienced, and the worries, and also the things that she really enjoyed. Both parents really delighted in their kids being on the farm. But that film really struck me, showing the isolation that families can feel out in rural frontier farms and ranches, separated from the rest. The dad made the point of, therapy, the biggest inhibitor would be getting to town or getting to an appointment. And it just made me feel grateful for all the voucher programs across the country that are doing teletherapy for farmers and ranchers out on their land. Here in Colorado, we have a film called Legacy that really highlights the Colorado Agriculture Addiction Mental Health Program that we have, but other states are doing that too. So I really like that film. The second film actually struck me more, or the second film that I watched, the one about the women, because I felt like that they were willing to be a bit more vulnerable about their stressors and how it was impacting them, and their just willingness to, be vulnerable really struck me. And I also really appreciated, because anybody who's worked with me knows that I'm a bit of a social connection junkie. And I think that is really the solution, that we have to continue to give farmers and ranchers opportunities to connect with others. And it was mentioned briefly in the family film, but the one about women, they really talked about their friendships and their community and the people in their lives that could be there for them. And that's just so valuable. So I was so grateful that that was highlighted in that film.
I think that raises a really interesting point, and I also appreciate what's coming up in the Melanie, the comment about women, and it was someone from WSU who's in charge of this overall project asked me why is Nevada making a film about women when a lot of the suicides are with older males, the farming suicides are with older males in agriculture. And so, it's like, this is a small percentage, and women's suicide rate in farming is at the national norm. So why are you making this? And Melanie made a point here, is that part of it is it's a growing sector, and part of it is that many of these women are working in partnerships with men. And so we're wondering, well, how are they managing their stress in such a way that they're not dealing with the suicide rates in the same way, that they're not struggling to the same extent. And so that's part of the reason that we focused on women, but also to go to the point about community. And I wondered if any of the panelists had any comments about the differences. And this, you're hearing some of my ignorance in agriculture with this question, but the differences between between farming where you're not as connected with the community, and farming where two of the women were talking about, we serve the community, that's what we do. And that their stress was about, wanting to do a great job serving the community, but that was also their resilience. But I wondered if any of the panelists had a thought about how seeing yourself, understanding your mission in agriculture as being connected to the community, how that might influence either stress or resiliency. I'm sorry, it wasn't on your list of questions that I sent out.
Well, I have a thought to that. And again, I mean, Maddie grew up on a dairy farm, so you probably have something that's much more in it. But just from my observation, I mean, there were a couple of women that, their mission on the farm was CSAs, right? And providing families with food. And so I would imagine, and they say it too, they're very honest about that being a stressor because if weather comes, if they can't make it, if plants die, right? Like they're not able to provide for a community member who might live 6 miles down the road, right? And so while I do think there is a little bit of added stress, or let's just say different type of stress, right? Knowing that you're working to grow food for someone in your community. I also think that could be a really nice protective factor, a source of social support and community building, like Clinton brought up, right? I mean, people come to pick up their food boxes, you see them, you know them, you inquire about their kids, they inquire about your life. And so you have a little bit more connection than if you were in commercial ag or doing something where, the end user of your product is in a different country, right? So I mean, to your point, Brenda, I think it brings up unique stressors because that person you're feeding, that family you're feeding is potentially right there down the road, but also can really facilitate some nice community connection and act as a protective factor or a source of resilience for these farmers and ranchers that are, as we all know, under a lot of pressure and stress.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo, I think Michelle nailed it. Growing up, watching, the many roles that my mom played in, you know, I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so I have a big family, and she works full time, and she's like a superhero in my eyes because she, helped my family get through harvest season. We grow all of our own corn, all of our own silage. And just like looking back on that now as I'm, older and understand kind of that dynamic, how much she like put aside of herself to support the family and the business. It's just amazing. And I think that um, I come from a valley that we've got a pretty big diversity of, small scale producers, larger commodity producers that, rely on exports. And then also, the smaller farms that, rely on CSAs and that kind of personal touch of business. And it is super. I like the point that Michelle brought up. It's different stressors that come along with the different kind of scale and direction your business is going in. I think that that's really key. Um, and yeah, I do think, that social connectedness is the most important thing when handling farm stress because a lot of times there's a big stigma behind farmers accessing these mental health resources because they feel like they're accessing them alone. Whereas if you get them together as a community, they realize that, oh, my stress isn't, isolated. I am going through things that are similar to my neighbors. So yeah, that was a good point, Michelle.
Feel free to break in anytime, audience, but there's a question I'd like to ask the panel in the Montana film. So for those of you not from our region, RASSEP's been working on reducing stigma towards mental health counseling. It's not our only approach. There's a lot of other preventative strategies for mental health with agriculture that are happening, but a thread that seems to run through the work is that the stigma about mental health and Michelle led a research study where we we asked them how they felt about going into counseling, and it wasn't in the top 5. That's correct, isn't it, Michelle? I don't think it was in the top
Not
5.
for the producers, but it was really high up there for the workers. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit that I don't need to get into now. But for the producers, no, it was pretty low on the list. So sorry, continue, Brenda.
Okay, so in the Montana film, we asked the question, well, do you think, have you sought mental health counseling? And basically, no one in the family had sought counseling, but they all indicated that if their family wasn't able to help them enough with a problem, that they weren't hesitant to seek counseling. And then we asked the father, do you think there's stigma about counseling? And he said, no, it's just going to take you a long time to get there because we're an hour away from anywhere or something like that. But then he said he didn't think there was stigma today with inside the agriculture community for seeking counseling. And I wondered if you agree, or to the panelists and also to anyone in the audience who would like to respond to this. I wonder if you agree or disagree with that, or what your experiences are about stigma in seeking mental health counseling.
I definitely had feelings around that. I'd love to know if anybody from the audience or the community that watched it, if they had thoughts around it as well. But that line stood out to me a lot when I saw the film because that definitely hasn't been my experience. The younger generation seems to be embracing behavioral health needs and normalizing behavioral health and seeking, assistance when times are rough and acknowledging that. But the older generation definitely hasn't. And so the fact that the dad is the one that said that was surprising for me because I feel like that's the generation that I'm constantly rubbing up against. How on earth do we reach this generation to get them to engage not only therapy, but just with each other in these real conversations? So curious if other people have experiences of that demographic, maybe 50 and above, that maybe are embracing this differently.
Would love to hear from the audience if any of you have anything to share. Thanks, Vince, for putting in the chat. Okay, so you're also echoing Clinton's point of view that young people seem to value it more. Let's just put it beyond. And even with, it's interesting about logistics, that's a very good point. Since, as a mental health provider, the face-to-face has a different quality to it, a different richness to it than telehealth does. Not that I'm saying telehealth isn't a good thing. Telehealth is a wonderful way to reach people who live, far away. But some of empathy happens more easily when you're in the same room with someone, and so I do think the distance is an important issue, and the expense, and these days the wait lists. It's hard to get insurance coverage for, in some cases, hard to get insurance that will cover high quality therapy, or maybe it'll only cover 3 sessions for someone. And if they're pretty seriously depressed, 3 sessions might not be enough assistance. So it may not feel like an option. It may not feel like an option. So I appreciate your comment, Vince. Michelle or Maddie, any comments on the accessibility of counseling and whether or not, we can help our farmers and ranchers to see that it might be a valuable route to take?
Yeah, I'd say here, from my Montana-based perspective, I mean, back in 2018, when I first started my position as a specialist, I visited every extension agent in all 56 counties that would have me, and sat down for a conversation with them and predominantly heard, oh gosh, well, we are very resistant to counseling and professional help when it comes to, anything mental health related. And so I think we've gone from there, I mean, as a state, I'm generalizing here, to now in 2026, when every single Farm Bureau conference, every single Farmers Union conference includes topics on mental wellness and mental health, and taking care of you. And while this isn't directly answering the question, I do think in terms of that needle of stigma, I do see it moving in a good direction here in Montana. And that's, anecdotal evidence, but still think it counts. I was surprised, as Clinton said, in the Montana film with that dad being of that generation and being so supportive of counseling. I mean, I thought, wow, how incredible. I was picturing that young son, if it became too much, having the supportive dad saying, well, go see a counselor. I mean, that sometimes is what you need. I know here at MSU, our counseling program is doing a lot of work getting federal grants in order to train new counselors to live and work in rural areas if they're not from rural areas. And it really has helped if they go through that program. It's called the Rural Pathways Project. I'm not sure if other universities have them, but it's really helping. And a lot of our graduates are wanting and ready and going out to meet that need of going to a rural community here in Montana and providing that service. So I certainly don't think, I still think we have a long way to go with stigma, but I am really happy with, some of those evidences of progress here in Montana.
Yeah, and for the stigma portion of it, as a young farmer who has a father who is in his 50s, so kind of that generation, I think that they're really leaning on their kids and the younger generation, just from my personal experience and also being out in the community. I talk to my dad all the time about mental health, and at first he was definitely like, "What's going on? Like, what are you trying to say to me?" But now, I have him rating his stress on a scale of 1 to 10 every day, and just kind of, I think, utilizing and leaning on those younger generations to talk to their family members. That, next generation up is really important. And talking about stigma, it reminds me of this story that when I first started, I asked a local farmer, I said, "Why don't you go, see a counselor?" And he said he was nervous that people were going to see his truck out in front of the counseling office because people knew his truck in the community. So they didn't want, the community to perceive them as something wrong with them. And for that, I really had to, talk to Dawn and ask kind of some guidance on that. So it's the stigma's still there, but I agree with Clinton and Michelle. I think that, the work we're doing and, across the nation is really helping. I started going to the farmers instead of expecting them to come to us. So kind of shifting that mindset, like attending Farm Bureau meetings and meeting the farmers at events that they're already going to be at has been really useful. We're doing this through our Pizza for Producers program too, and recognizing the value in kind of those informal conversations, to kind of build that trust to maybe refer to a counseling voucher program or, more formal counseling. So that's just from what my experience has been.
Before we move on from that, I want to echo two things. One is what Maddie just said around trust. And I do think that, with the whole stigmatized conversation, once you get to know somebody and that they can trust you, I think that they're more willing to have those conversations. Maybe they won't go to therapy, but at least they'll talk to you about the stresses in their life or how the challenges are impacting them. And then the other one is, I completely agree. I've only been doing this since 2021, really 2022. And Michelle's been at this longer than me, but just in the past, 4 years that I've been a part of this, it has, the conversation has so been normalized at conferences, with people reaching out, wanting to talk about this across the board, extension, staff and agents here in Colorado they'll be doing a soil health event and ask if we can come and talk about, any overlay between mental health, behavioral health, and soil health. And it's really fun to see how we're able to integrate this in agriculture conversations and how people are really connecting, the well-being of their crops and livestock are so important, but that they neglect their own well-being. And really how people are starting to acknowledge this more is hopeful and positive. And I'm excited for the trajectory that we're headed.
Thank you. Jill, do you have a question you'd like to ask the panel?
Yeah, I think Michelle touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering, because I am in a very rural part of Nevada, and I see where farmers and ranchers are resistant to get going to counseling. And I think it's because a lot of, one, the waiting list is huge. But the second thing that's the biggest issue is a lot of them really don't understand what it's like, with drought, wildfire, and all these other things that really impact the bottom line of their businesses, and just this, all the stressors. But I think that sometimes going to therapy is like, well, they won't really get me or get my problems. My problems are somewhat different than, a lot of my problems aren't just occurring within me. They're also, occurring to me in a way. And so I wonder, what else is being done or could be done to help prepare those who are already on the ground or being trained to provide that mental health.
Well, with Clinton, were you about to talk about land logic? If so, please go ahead, because
I
that
was,
was
but
my
I'd
point.
love for you to start it.
Okay. Well, I think the point Clinton and Maddie have made, trust, meeting people where they're at is so important, as you say, Jill. And so not expecting all of the work, right, to be done on the point of the farmer or rancher, but also some of the extra work to be done on the part of the counselor, right, and meeting the farmers, ranchers, producers, workers where they're at. And so there is a project called Land Logic. And what this is, it's a training for counselors to learn the agrarian imperative, learn about agriculture, the culture behind agriculture, so that if you are a producer and let's say you have 50 minutes, right, which is a lot of time if it's calving season, and you finally pick up the phone, you don't have to spend 35 of the 50 minutes explaining why you can't control your stressors, why work-life balance is so hard to achieve, why, XYZ, right? You're not explaining the life of agriculture to that counselor, but they can actually meet you where you're at. So I'll let Clinton explain more about Land Logic, but Land Logic is, again, can be, many counselors can sign up and take this. And if they're not from an ag background, they can do a little bit of their part to kind of meet that farmer or rancher where they're at. And Clinton, please fill in.
No, I dropped the link to Land Logic in the chat, and if people have questions, they can definitely reach out. My colleague Chad Resnicek, one of the creators of the Land Logic program, and it was created exactly as Michelle was talking about, just to give therapists, particularly in rural agriculture communities, a better understanding of some of the stressors and some of the ways to have those harder conversations. It was heavily influenced by the work of Michael Roseman, who is known for the agrarian imperative, that really talks about the level that people in agriculture will go to protect their land, their business, their crops and animals. And just he talks about it being this genetic predisposition that they just go. And the resiliency is often highlighted, but often it's at the deficit or the harm of themselves or their own well-being. And so Land Logic really does get into that. So if you're a therapist or know somebody is that would like the links there, and there's some different opportunities for trainings online and in person. So as Michelle said, it's worth looking into. And then the other thing that I was thinking as you were asking the question, Jill, is I think that we've done a poor job of letting farmers and ranchers know that it's not necessarily about them going and the therapist solving their problems, but it's about them going and being heard, that their concerns are valid, that their condition and what they're feeling is valid, and that therapy really is more of a space that can almost normalize what they're experiencing, and even the feelings of like, I sometimes wish that I could die. You know, that's a normal feeling when everything in the world starts feeling like it's against you and that there's no way to get out of it. And so for a therapist to really be there and say, yes, and how can we support you? What are things in your life that we can do to really bring some alternatives to just feeling defeated like there? And I think that we need to do a better job of helping people just see the value in that connection and what therapy can offer, and that it's not just, they're not going to understand my crop situation, or they're not going to understand the climate or the financial. That's not really what it's about. It's really about seeking support for yourself and honoring that what you're going through is real and valid.
That's an
Thank
excellent
you.
point. Yeah. You know, we're just at the beginning of creating a required course for counselors that will be piloting at UNR on this topic. And I'm hoping to connect with Colorado State and also with Michelle with your program on this to include components in there. But what we're trying to do is we've realized that if the accreditation body doesn't have it in their standards, then it doesn't get taught. And right now, the Council for the Accreditation of Counselors and Related Educational Programs, CACREP, which is the accreditation body for counseling, doesn't have any standards about working with people from rural areas or, being knowledgeable about agriculture or anything like that. And so what we're trying to do with this class is to pick the CACREP standards that do overlap and pull those in and then pilot it at least 3 counselor ed programs and then give it away to counselor ed programs as a mechanism for addressing a couple of the related standards. Because if it's not in the standards, they don't have time to teach it. And so they put their graduates out, and unless they happen to have had a clinical supervisor who was rural, they just don't have this information. It's not a part of the training program. So that's all. That work will be thanks to funding from RASIP. So a big shout out to Maddie's organization. I'd like to, oh, Julie, thank you for your comment. Yeah, it's Julie had a fantastic table at Oregon State last weekend. And I can see that you are talking to a lot of people and doing a lot of QPR training to bring awareness to the issue. And they seem to, I looked down at your list and I was shocked that just by putting uh, I was really surprised. You had about 900 farmers, small farmers and ranchers there, and all you did was put out this sign up list for QPR, and I can't believe without making any kind of a serious pitch to any audience, farmers and ranchers were signing up to take a suicide prevention program. I just thought that was amazing work on your part, Julian. Speaks so well to what you're doing at Oregon State and the way you've saturated your state with suicide prevention in agriculture communities there in Oregon. Um, so I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to ask a question that relates to extension. And when and Michelle was on this publication and where we put together, we did qualitative interviews with farmers and ranchers, and we put together a model, a resiliency model. And so we were looking at what are some of the factors that help people to be resilient when they have uncontrollable situations like drought here in Nevada, which is a huge issue in a lot of places I know. And and so rather than looking at the person, which we did look at, like what's the trait of the individual that would have an individual being resilient, like a positive attitude would be an example. But we were also looking at the environment. So what's happening in the environment that can help a farmer or rancher be resilient when they are in a tough corner and under a lot of stress. So my question for the panel, which I did send this one out in advance, I'm interested in your thoughts about what do you think is the role of extension in helping to build resiliency or helping directly with farmers and ranchers as they deal with stress? What role do we play in extension?
I can start, though, still thinking about this question. It's this one was so interesting for me to ponder because I think in many ways, and it a little bit depends on your role within Extension. So what immediately came to mind, so I'm an FCS specialist. Though in this work, I'm obviously trying my very best to work across, with other disciplines, with ag in particular. But I think our agents, and often in Montana, we have one agent with all four specialties. They're by themselves in a rural area of Montana. But I think one is really, knowledge dissemination, right? And being there to put on educational workshops, whether that be health promotion, what is mental health and how does it link to nutritional health and physical health? And I see a lot of our FCS agents doing that. And I am really pleased that there's so much more synergy now between, I think you said this earlier, Brenda, when an ag agent hosts a workshop about pesticide training and AI in ag, inviting FCS agents in maybe over the lunch hour to talk about health promotion, positive coping, things like that. So I really see Extension as sort of a skill building and educational resource. I also, with a lot of our outreach that we're doing as part of RASSUP, we've had the opportunity in Montana to share with all ag agents, right, who are going out and helping people with, very specialized agricultural issues, have wallet cards. So these little cards of, if that person or that farmer or rancher needs some extra help, and getting as many ag agents trained in QPR as we possibly can. Because oftentimes, especially if folks are hesitant and pressed for time, they might really want a nitrate test done, right? Or need that. And that's the ag agent they'll interact with. But if that ag agent is QPR trained and is there at the ready to hand off some resources, I really think that's what we were missing for a long time here in Montana. I'm not going to speak for any other state, but I think we're finally seeing that if we work together and capitalize on, our own strengths and when we're going to interact with the public, we can really get, that ag agent specialized, that consumer specialized ag help and then pass them over a warm handoff to maybe someone in FCS or counseling or XYZ. So again, I think skill building, connection to the resource they may not need, even by someone who you may not think would know that resource. And then, helping with problem solving and those types of things. So again, I think Extension can be a huge source of support, resilience, and just be in that sort of community circle of a protective factor.
Here in Colorado, we have done a lot of the same stuff that Michelle's talking about, just trying to make sure that our extension agents feel confident in having hard conversations with folks. Here in Colorado, we've used the COMET program, which I know a couple of you guys are trained in or are familiar with, and it really has done a good job, I think, of normalizing just difficult conversations, and that you don't have to solve the problems or you don't have to fix it, but that there's so much value in just asking, how are you? Listening well when the person, says it, and validating that what they're going through is challenging, and that you might not be able to, as the extension specialist or agent, you might not be able to fix that. You do have resources, as Michelle said, but that you're here to support other things that may be causing them stress. But just, I think, continuing to reiterate the value of allowing it to be okay that things are hard, listening to somebody, and just letting them know that they're not alone, that extension agents can do that and they can check back in. It's kind of like the doctor when you go and they ask I think it's HPQ9, 4 questions on how are you. I don't know that we have to come up with that for extension, but I do hope that we can continue to normalize the serious check-in that extension can do when they meet with somebody of, how are you? No, really, how are you? This has been going on, or I know that this, to really give that person the space to say, this has really been hard. I'm really glad that you're here to help with this, or what, but just that expectation of the check-in. Extension agents are sometimes the only person that that person might interact with off their farm in a week or so, And so I think that's super valuable, and we can offer that, and we can be that point of contact. Maddie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what both of you are saying. I think that, extension, the model is we take research and we provide, education to the community. So in a way that they can understand and really absorb it. Um, Another thing, just to reiterate, trust is super important for rural communities. And I think that extension provides that, like that sense of trust, because, a lot of times people can, going back to the how are you, what's going on, depending on who's asking, sometimes it can have adverse effects of feeling maybe invasive. And I think that extension, we have really good community trust and really good face value to rural communities. People like their land grant universities for the most part. People really like, people from WSU here in Washington State, at least, they'll give us a go Cougs, and, we'll be able to kind of have those conversations with them. So that's, the only thing I would add is that extension is trusted. People like talking to, our office, and at least from our county standpoint. So yeah.
I have a comment I agree with the panelists about being open and being willing to check in with people, and also the trust issue. And if there's anyone on here who is not working in farm stress, but working in another part of extension, I guess I'd like to add that resiliency building comes from showing up, being there with people, but also problem solving. So if you can help me set up a better financial plan, maybe someone on here works with the business end of agriculture, and you know how to help a farmer take a look at their financial planning. And my stress will be if a lot of my stress is about my finances, and you can just give me some skills or a better way to improve that, in addition to encouragement and instilling hope. I just a shout out to all. I'm a mental health person in extension, but many aren't. But the gifts that they bring, even if mental health maybe isn't what they want to talk about, the gift they bring is as they help farmers and ranchers solve some of these problems, or at least have a better handle on directions they could go if they're facing a problem. That's a huge resiliency factor, because then the farmer or rancher has just a little bit more control because they have more knowledge. And so, I just but I also really agree with the idea of, extension being trusted, and being showing up and listening, and being there as a source of support. Jill, where are we on time? And
We have about 9 minutes left, and I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience that, as you've been listening, are there other questions or comments that you'd like to make to our panel? And maybe as we wait, I'm wondering if any of our panelists have begun to do any work with rural youth or farmer ranching youth, and what kind of work you're doing, and if you've seen any best practices come from that, or things that you would recommend that other states might consider as they're working with youth and trying to move the needle on mental health with kids who are working or living on farms or ranches.
I mean, just real quick, others might know more than me, but we only have a couple minutes. Here in Montana, we are doing teen mental health first aid, and we have a lot. We keep training more trainers to be able to offer that in rural schools. And as you all know, a lot of those kids live on farms or ranches. Also, here in Montana, we developed the mental wellness conversation curriculum. I can type a link in the chat. I don't know if, yes, I can, to our website, but we are in the process of adapting that to have a youth version. So we have a cab right now. Many youth are on that cab. And so what that is basically a card game that you can play in an informal setting to learn about positive coping strategies geared toward individuals in agriculture. So I'll share the link to the general website, but know that we're still about 9 months out for the youth version.
So the one thing that I'll say that we have done is we've tried to engage both 4-H and FFA here in Colorado, and really make sure that we are present at their convenings of youth and at different areas, and focusing on teaching them tools. And I know that in Michelle's conversation curriculum, if you look that up, there's a ton of great tools in there that you can help people with. Just helping kids learn the value of their breath, their sleep, the food that they eat. You know, it's not real popular a lot of times talking about eating less sugar or drinking less caffeine, but just helping them understand how that impacts them. But what is popular often is teaching them breathing techniques, because kids can really associate with just heavy, stressful situations, and giving them something like box breathing or even just a mindful breath. I've found that kids really enjoy that. So for us, it's been getting tools in kids' hands early so that when the stressors of their life and as they grow, they have and feel more confident with that.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because I would say within the last year, just in our office here at Skagit County Extension, we've gotten more inquiries on how we can partner with 4-H and youth and develop programs on how to um, provide them that educational piece to mental health and wellness. Um, it's also I did my internship for my master's in elementary school in the school counseling office. So my background's kind of more in developmental and youth mental health programming, but it's really being ingrained in schools nowadays too. So the kids are getting a really good foundation of mental health, coping mechanisms and different wellness tools from a young age, which is great because that's something even I didn't have when I was in elementary school. They didn't really talk about it until I was in college. And I think that, 4-H and FFA is a really great, partnership that we can develop in RASSA because, these kids, they come from farming families, but they're also competing, right? So these are tools that they can use in real time when they're competing or, giving a public presentation or something like that. So I think ingraining that into early programming is really key for upcoming generations.
Well, I'd like to thank the panelists very much for your insights and for taking your time to be with us today and for the great work you're doing. And also thank those of you who participated with us today. Appreciate you as well, and hope to hear from you. Our emails are in the chat box, so if we can connect on any of these topics, we would be happy to do so. Let's see, Jill, Melanie, comments to close us with?
I think it definitely we want to thank Melanie and our panelists. I know I personally have learned so much today and was really glad to be a part of this process. And just want to remind you, Melanie had posted a link in the chat. We'd love to have your questions and your feedback. That's really helpful for us to know what we can do to continue in this work.
Yes, thank you so much for the panelists for being here today and sharing your great perspectives. I've really enjoyed these past two sessions. I will be sending out all the links shared, the documentary shared last time, as well as the emails from Brenda and Jill. So everyone will have that. So you can reference that in the future. And again, I just want to thank you for being here today and for all your work that you do in your states and your communities to, make Extension a more well-rounded and seeing the whole person that we're working with. So it's really heartening to be on here and just hear how you all are like making real change. So I want to thank you for that. And I'll stay on for a couple minutes at the top of the hour if anyone wants to hang out and has any lingering questions or comments.
And thank you, Vincent, for your kind words. And